As we speak, millions of people throughout the country are unemployed due to COVID, and millions of others have had their lives destroyed through the processes of automation and outsourcing from the 1970s to the early 2000s, leaving entire communities throughout the entire country completely decimated. These millions are no longer viable candidates of the workforce, and this problem isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So, how should we deal with this issue? Meaning, how can we make as much money as possible off of this labor crisis, all while saddling the responsibility and negative consequences onto the victims? Well, I got a solution. Now, some more bleeding heart liberal types might consider creating some sort of completely voluntary adult education system, helping unemployed people and adults of all kinds, really, to develop skills that will help them to transition into new jobs. Yeah, it would help these people, but it would be way too expensive. And where's the profit? Because it's not like they'd be able to afford it. So, simply since there is no chance of helping these people, we should manufacture a mass addiction. Hear me out here. Instead of us paying money for all the education, unemployment benefits, and social security, we can get them snared in an endless bureaucratic web of the medical system, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, banks, and public services in an effort to spend the rest of their lives and their money overcoming their addictions. Instead of us paying for them, they're paying for us. Their social security money and other benefits go back into the system. But we need to find the right drug, something highly addictive that can be easily distributed. These people wouldn't be able to afford cocaine. We could do crack, but that's got a too negative reputation. It would be extremely difficult to manufacture all of the meth necessary. All things considered, it would be best if the drug could be legal and be prescribed by doctors. So, that brings us to poppy. We can make high-grade, highly addictive painkillers and distribute them throughout decimated communities by providing doctors great incentives to prescribe them en masse. Just like all Americans, most doctors are just oblivious asses chasing carrots and will comply if you give them substantial prescription bonuses, trips to conferences at luxurious Caribbean resorts, and fancy dinners with hot pharmaceutical representatives, some of whom they might even get to fuck afterward while their wives are at home with the kids. Easier done than said. Seriously, this is a true stimulus package for the medical system and pharmaceutical and insurance companies. Plus, if patients run out of prescribed painkillers, they can turn to heroin on the streets, which could even land them in one of our many prisons where they'd be sure to receive adequate care for their addictions, including laboring for less than $1 per hour, even to put out our wildfires. Think of how virtuous we'd be being. These people would probably get addicted to drugs anyway, being all unemployed with no prospects. There's no jobs plan or adult education system in place to aid them in any way. So we'd really just be taking our fiduciary responsibility very seriously by going in and profiting off of their misfortunes. They're not doing anything for the economy as it is and will only prove to be a drag if we try to help them. Now we're getting them back in the system. Haven't you ever heard of the velocity of money? Their misfortune is good for our profits, which are ultimately what's best for the society, right? Their lives will have meaning again, as they will derive it from weaning themselves off of their newly developed addictions. But how do we go about getting that much opium? I mean, we are talking about an enormous amount here, no small operation. I'm thinking we should find a country that is fit for large-scale opium production, and if that country is unwilling to agree to our demands, which they most likely will be, just overthrow it, as we've done dozens of times before, citing a need to protect their citizens' human rights and our national security. Then install a banana republic-like government and begin mass production. Buy up the majority of that opium, enlist pharmaceutical companies to produce high-grade, highly addictive painkillers, and get people from these economically disadvantaged areas addicted to them. Problem solved. As we would most likely need to overthrow a government to make this happen, how can we get the American people behind a war that would ultimately be us, the aggressor, invading a country for its resources? You can't just tell them, hey, we want to invade another country for resources to which millions of you will be addicted. Don't think that would fly too well. So, what you need to do is manufacture some sort of event, something so spectacularly traumatic that it will function kind of like a new Pearl Harbor, simultaneously scaring the people about an evil other in a faraway land and engendering feelings of patriotism, of God and country, and our manifest destiny. Attack some major landmark, preferably a place that has a nice insurance policy with regard to terrorist attacks. Get the owner of that landmark billions and begin planning for an even bigger and better symbol of our freedom. Once the attack happens, pinpoint the culprit immediately, call for war, and make the people feel the war is all about values. You need to convince them that the terrorists in that faraway opium-rich country hate America for its freedom. If Americans are not with the plan, they are with the terrorists. And the best thing about this is that this event can be used to justify so many other things. You'd want to do it even if you didn't want to do the opioid plan. Think about it. You can use it to justify the militarization of police forces, as well as the invasion of other countries we might want to pillage for resources and other geopolitical purposes, bringing in untold billions for weapons contractors and oil companies. We can lump these countries together and call them an axis of evil, maybe? On top of that, it would be very helpful to turn people in those countries against America in some way, to establish a concrete enemy. For instance, there was this group called the Mujahideen that the American military equipped to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1970s and 80s. Oh, shit. Did everything I just say already happen? Sure, there's nothing like that in the official narrative, but there was the arming of the Mujahideen, 9/11, the war in Afghanistan leading to mass opium production, the opioid crisis being fueled by that opium, the war in Iraq, the militarization of police, mass surveillance, cyber surveillance, the suspension of habeas corpus. And now, there's a blowhard reality TV star as president. Damn it! Why didn't I try out for The Apprentice when I had the chance? But a lot of people sure got lucky with 9/11, didn't they? Seriously, when the Soviet Union fell, America had no major enemies and every military was minuscule compared to the States. But then, a bunch of guys with box cutters and zero experience flying jet aircrafts were able to successfully hijack 737s, perfectly execute complex maneuvers, and hit 3 targets with pinpoint accuracy. As for the 4th plane, well, we sure did get a riveting summer blockbuster out of it, didn't we? Nothing is too sacred to profit off of, remember. Anyway, terrorism. Yes, now we need trillions more dollars to fight people with box cutters, because we clearly hadn't spent enough to stop them in the first place. And just on a side note, isn't it a little odd that Al-Qaeda, a global organization that apparently posed an existential threat requiring trillions of dollars to fight, couldn't even find a single pilot to fly for them? But I digress. And it really doesn't matter, because we sure did get our wars, didn't we? And they've been amazing for oil companies, defense contractors, and news ratings. And aren't the Predator drones great? Don't you just love bombing defenseless villagers and nations with vastly inferior militaries? Also, the US can have some geopolitical and economic advantages? God bless us! God bless us. And isn't it great when the government, military, and media start employing that soft, euphemistic language to mask their sins? For instance, we didn't invade Iraq. We put boots on the ground. And they weren't soldiers we sent, but freedom fighters. But to ask the same question as George Carlin, if firefighters fight fire and crime fighters fight crime, what do freedom fighters fight? They never talk about that, do they? And we've done a lot of drone bombings, as we do so love our drones, even bombing some weddings, funerals, schools, and hospitals, many of which done by our Nobel Peace Prize winning president, who seems wholly unconcerned with winning another. But these attacks aren't massacres, they're acts of depopulation. And there aren't any dead civilians, there's only collateral damage. And Iraq has collateral damage in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And as for many other innocent civilians with a different fate, they don't become prisoners, but detainees. They aren't subjected to being kidnapped and imprisoned indefinitely without a trial. They're subjected to extraordinary rendition. And they didn't get thrown in secret military prisons, but placed in off-site detention camps. Sounds like summer school for juvenile delinquents. And in these camps, the detainees aren't subjected to torture. They experience enhanced interrogation techniques. Assassinations are now targeted killings, or we can say that we didn't assassinate Qasem Soleimani, we neutralized him. The Pentagon now even refers to its activities as low-intensity irregular warfare, including operations in 147 countries since 9/11. When our troops accidentally kill their fellow troops, it's friendly fire. Oh, I am so sorry, bro. No offense, really. And many soldiers who come home have PTSD, which was once known as shell shock in World War I. As George Carlin points out, that was a bit too direct. Hearing the word sends people's minds straight to the trenches. Shell shock. So, in World War II, it became battle fatigue. A little bit easier to take than shell shock. Battle fatigue. Oh, let me rest my head a moment. I have battle fatigue. But that wasn't enough. Battle is still a disturbing word. So, by the Korean War, that same condition became operational exhaustion. 8 syllables now, and it sounds like something that happens to your car. But it wasn't scientific enough, so finally, come Vietnam, it became known as post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And we've come a long way since then, right? And as many troops still don't get the necessary treatment, as many have been forced to endure unimaginable trauma without having adequate financial resources upon returning home. But that is no matter, because these soldiers are heroes. We've gone so far as to elevate them to hero status. And of course, changing the word used to describe the situation actually changes the reality. Seriously, they should be honored to have made sacrifices for us, and they should be happy with their shiny medallions while they spend the rest of their lives confined to wheelchairs. And as for the 20 heroes who commit suicide every single day, well, we like heroes who aren't so emotionally weak as to sin before the eyes of God. And who are many of the heroes returning home who don't have access to adequate care? Many who live in American overseas territories. You know, those colonies the US acquired in 1898? The American Samoans are a martial race who fight for the US, but many must fly thousands of miles to Hawaii to get treatment. On top of that, the territories contribute many soldiers when they themselves don't have statehood or full citizenship rights. How is that much different from the time when we would send our black and white boys to die side by side in Vietnam, when we wouldn't even allow them to sit together at the same lunch counter in Birmingham? And 9/11 helped out the military and defense contractors at home too, right? We got the USA Patriot Act, which stands for Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Is that Orwellian enough for you? The Patriot Act brought us the militarization of local police forces, mass surveillance, and cyber surveillance. All while we're bitching about our precious First and Second Amendment rights, we got to lose our Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment ones. Glory, glory, hallelujah! And how do regular people feel about all this? Well, they are just fine and dandy. Are you kidding me? What, with their big screens, iPads, iPhones, MacBooks, mega malls, mini marts, sports, gadgets, gizmos, luxury brands, supersized meals, social media, and the relentless pursuit of the almighty dollar? They could not be bothered in the slightest. And if you try to question things with them, you get that good old American head-down, ass-up ethic born of generations of European peasants populating this land at the expense of the original inhabitants. Don't question, just do. Everything is fine, or it will improve gradually. Because, you know, the most celebrated leaders in history were conventional centrists calling for status quo maintenance coupled with incremental progress. In fact, right offhand, I can think of none. And it's an attitude that's very in line with a democracy. I'm pretty sure that great bastion of freedom and liberty known as China has a fairly similar MO. And we're just fine that we all live in a society where a small group drags everyone else along, controlling all aspects of our lives, the kinds of jobs we work, the movies and shows we watch, the books and magazines we read, the schools that educate our children, the technology we use, the clothes we wear, the foods we eat, the politicians we elect, all predetermined. Sure, we can make decisions within the given selections, but the selections are limited by the suppliers, donors, and manufacturers, so the decisions are therefore determined. And why do they just drag us along? Because we are too fucking stupid to make decisions for ourselves, of course. We're stupid to question things as they are. Everything is great as is, so stop complaining as your problems are merely the result of your own personal defects and poor decision making. Pick yourselves up by the bootstraps. Let's face it, folks, this is the best we can do as a species. Just dragging along the vast majority of people, keeping them entertained and ignorant of the true state of affairs. So don't hope and try to make things better. Just get the fuck back to work and think about your career. Gotta worry about them jabs, don't you? And why don't you pop out a kid or two while you're at it? We need more consumers. Get you buying them all kinds of designer clothes they'll outgrow in a few months. Kids really are one of the best fashion accessories and a great way to compete with others. And your kids will grow into consumers who will derive spiritual satisfaction from an incessant flux of unnecessary low-quality shit or high-quality designer shit. You know, when they're young, they'll get the pleasure of being bullied by their peers and teachers alike. And when they get to work, they'll get to be bullied by their bosses. And if they have the honor of becoming bosses themselves, then they'll get to do the lording. Sounds great, right? All right? And their loftiest ambitions will be to get rich and have families and buy as much shit as possible. Because yes, in this God-given greatest country in the world, the people have the same ambitions as typical medieval peasants. They won't be encouraged to think about the big picture. The thinking will be done for them. Because let's face it, we are nothing. How could we possibly be smart enough to govern ourselves? I mean, seriously, you wouldn't want to be exploited, which means you're truly mentally deficient. This system necessitates exploitation, especially at the lowest levels, so it's too bad for you if you don't like that. The world isn't fair. You need someone doing the important thinking for you, so you're welcome. Now, head down, ass up. You've got a promotion to worry about, bitch. You know, at some parts, I have to practice not laughing. I guess it's kind of like losing your gag reflex after sucking so much dick.